Are you writing a PhD thesis or research papers? Maybe you're writing a literature review and you're not sure how and when to reference correctly? Then in this video, I'm going to show you exactly in what situations you need to provide references to support your claims and exactly how to do this. So let's dive right in. Now, this video is based on the biggest mistakes that I see PhD students and researchers make when it comes to referencing appropriately in research papers or in PhD thesis. And this is based on working with over 400 PhD students and researchers at Academic English Now, where we help them regularly write and submit research papers to top journals and also write excellent theses. So I've seen a lot of research papers and theses from our clients in all sorts of different fields, and there are certain mistakes and misconceptions that people have about referencing, and that's why in this video I want to show you exactly how you can avoid these mistakes and show you exactly in what situations you need to reference and how to do it appropriately. Now, before we proceed, just a little disclaimer: this video is not about any specific referencing style such as APA, Harvard, or Chicago. I'll make other videos on specific referencing styles and reference formatting, but you can also check out this video where I talk about using Zotero in order to automatically format all your references regardless of the style. In this video, we're going to focus specifically on when to reference, in what situations to reference, so that you can have a more robust literature review in your paper or in your thesis, and importantly, so that you can also avoid plagiarism. So let's get right into it.
I'm going to talk about how and when to reference correctly. Now, this video is not going to be about a specific referencing style, because there are a million different referencing styles, each with different set of rules. And for that, you want to use a program like Zotero or Mendeley to automate it. And we have videos on how to use Zotero correctly to reference in any style. So it's going to be more about the mistakes that I've noticed PhD students and researchers make when it comes to placing references in the text in the literature review, right? It's going to be more about the principles of when to reference, when to cite, and how to do that correctly in a literature review, in a paper, or in a thesis chapter. So when do you reference? Basically, whenever you use someone else's idea, right? You're not using the words or anything like it, you're just using their idea. You've got to reference it. When you paraphrase from another text, you've got to reference. And when you quote, you've got to reference. So basically, in a nutshell, in an introduction to a paper, in a literature review chapter or section of a paper, you basically have to reference in almost every single sentence. That's it. It's that simple. So you kind of reference all the time in those parts of the text. Let me show you maybe an example of that. This is in here. You can see the references in numbers in those, at the end of the sentences, those small blue numbers, right? So this is a specific referencing style. You might be using a different one. That doesn't matter. The point here is, though, that the person in every single sentence, there's just one sentence in here that starts with therefore that has no reference, but that sentence starting with therefore is really more like of a comment from the author than something that needs a reference. But every other sentence has at least one, and two sentences have two references. So really, that's what you have to be doing all the time when you're reviewing literature, either in the introduction or in the literature review section chapter, right? So that's one thing to remember: reference, reference, reference. Now, what you want to have, if you're using a style such as APA, where you're going to be using the names of the authors, the surnames, what you want to be doing is, have a mix of references at the beginning and at the end of the sentence. Okay, how does that look? Well, if you take a look at this paragraph, right, you can see that the first sentence has a lot of references at the end of the sentence. But then the next sentence starts with the reference to the author. Like the author, Davis, is at the beginning of the sentence, right? And then we have other references, again, at the end of that paragraph that are kind of, in the middle of the sentences, right? So that's what you want to do. You don't want to have a paragraph that only has references at the beginning of the sentence. That's one of the biggest mistakes that I see people make in literature reviews, is that they start every sentence with the name of the author. And in week 3 of the PhD Accelerator, when we talk about writing the literature review, I explain different variation patterns that you can use to avoid that. But basically, you know, this is sort of what you want to be doing when you're reviewing literature. You want to have paragraphs like that. What you want to also have is, you know, several references to support one point whenever relevant. So for example, in here, you know, notice that you know, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 references, right, to support one point. You want to do this if the point is super important. So maybe at the beginning of a paragraph, right? Or if you're saying, you know, numerous studies show that, or previous research concludes that, you know, you're kind of summarizing all the previous studies or all the previous research in kind of one sentence. That's when you want to use 3 to 5 references. It's not very common to go over 5, so don't overdo it and don't have like 7 references, because that's not the point either. And please don't do it in every sentence. Only do it when you're really like summarizing the literature in one sentence. But it's a really good way of providing more evidence to support your point. Now, what you also want to do is, if you have a list, you know, of facts in a sentence, you might need to use a different reference to support each of those facts, as in the example in here, right? So notice that, you know, we've got ethnic background and nationality, and that's supported by 2 references. And then we've got accent and name, which is supported by another reference, and willingness is supported by another reference, right? So the point is that, you know, you can't put all the references here at the end of this sentence, because not all of them apply to each element, right? For example, Ali only applies to accent and name. So this is very useful if you have a list of facts, you know, of points that you want to make in one sentence, right? But, you know, each of those points is supported by a different reference. So that's another thing that you want to be doing. And again, this just really shows that you have read widely in the literature, and you really know your literature. Another thing that you can do is you can potentially focus on one study in more detail. Now, this is not very common, but you might want to have one paragraph where you're discussing a specific study in a little bit more detail. So a big mistake that I see people make is that they put the reference at the end of that paragraph. And then there are like 5 sentences throughout the whole paragraph and there are no references. That's not a good way to do it, because if you just put the reference at the end of that paragraph and there are no other references within the paragraph, we don't know, you know, what that reference refers to. So instead, what you want to do is you want to start this paragraph with the reference, right? So like in here, Royker and Eves look at blah, 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 right? Then, you know, we know that this is about this study, and then the second sentence says they, right? So that clearly refers back to the 2 researchers, right? And then the third sentence says, additionally, the researchers also. So it's very clear, because I started with the reference and then I have the pronoun they, and then in the third sentence I use the researchers, it's very clear that the following sentences refer to this specific study. So if you're focusing on one study in a paragraph, make sure that you use that study at the beginning. I mean, it doesn't have to be the first word like it is here, but you should use the reference at the beginning, not just at the end of the paragraph. Okay? So that's really, really important.
If you'd like to work with me and my team to help you to write an excellent PhD thesis or publish research papers in top journals in your field, then definitely book a free one-to-one consultation. The link to do that is right below this video. We'll meet one-on-one and identify what your biggest challenges currently are, what you want to achieve, and then talk about what working together might look like, and we'll outline a personalized action plan for you that will help you to achieve your goals. And the link to book that free one-to-one consultation is right below this video.